Namaskar and good morning to you all. Thank you for joining the team SR Ranganathan Learning Hub IIT Jodhpur for an exciting expert lecture on the topic Nuances of Scholarly Communication, What Every Student Needs to Know. This is being delivered by Rick Anderson, University Librarian, Brigham Young University, Utah, USA. We are happy to share that we are kickstarting the Learning Hub webinar series with Rick's talk today, with an aim of providing you students with valuable insights into the world of scholarly communication and equipping you with essential knowledge for your academic journey. Particularly, those of you who are enrolled in graduate and research level programs at IIT Jodhpur and other higher education institutions in the city of Jodhpur. Most of you aim at publishing your research papers in good peer-reviewed journals and of course in your respective areas. It would be beneficial for you to learn about scholarly publishing and related aspects from a global standpoint. I'm sure many of you will be aiming to get a global exposure after completing your programs in India. That is where the idea of associating with global experts emerged, and we rolled out this webinar series for you. I take pleasure in introducing today's speaker to this young audience. Rick Anderson is University Librarian of Brigham Young University. He has worked previously as a bibliographer for YBP Incorporated and head acquisitions librarian for the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, as director of resource acquisition at University of Nevada, Reno, and as associate dean for collections and scholarly communication at the University of Utah. He serves on numerous editorial and advisory boards and is a regular contributor to the Scholarly Kitchen. Scholarly Kitchen, I must tell you, is a globally well-known popular platform for the exchange of ideas and opinions about the current trends in scholarly communication. I urge you must all visit this blog, the platform, and I'm sure you will get a lot of information and insights into this field. Rick served as president of NASIG, that is North American Serials Interest Group, and of the Society for Scholarly Publishing, and is a recipient of the Harrisowitz Leadership in Library Acquisitions Award. Rick is the author of 3 books, including the recent one, Scholarly Communication, What Everyone Needs to Know, published by Oxford University Press in 2018, which has been published in English and Japanese and is currently being translated into Chinese. For your information, we have acquired a copy of this book in our library, and please feel free to drop in and read the book. Without any further ado, I hand over the baton to Rick and invite him to begin his talk. Rick, kindly take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kshema. It's a pleasure to be with you, albeit remotely. And I thank all of you for giving me some of your time this morning. And I hope that the ideas and the concepts that I will share today will be useful to you and will help you as you prepare to embark on your careers as scholars or as scientists or just as responsible citizens, because a lot of the principles that I will talk about that have to do with scholarly communication are really principles that it is important for all citizens to understand as they read and consume information that is provided to them by not just scholarly publications, but also general news outlets and information that you hear from friends. The principles that underlie effective and ethical scholarly communication are the same principles that underlie ethical and responsible consumption of all kinds of information. And you'll see what I mean as we go on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what scholarly communication is, and also about some of the complexities and challenges that we face in the scholarly communication world right now, and some of the issues that may be relevant to you now as students and that are likely to become even more relevant for you in the future, especially if you end up pursuing careers that bring you into contact with academia and publishing. So next slide, please. So I think it's very important to understand that scholarly communication is an ecosystem. Well, why do I call it that? We usually use the word ecosystem in the context of natural ecology when we're talking about the physical world around us. But the word also applies to marketplaces. So one definition that I've found of a business ecosystem is a network of organizations, including suppliers, distributors, customers, government agencies, and so on, that are involved in the delivery of a specific product or service through both competition and cooperation. And in the case of scholarly communication, the system is actually providing lots of different products and services. So I just want to quickly go through this list of various elements of the scholarly communication ecosystem, some of which will be obvious to you, but some of which might be less obvious. So the first one, of course, is the scholars and the scientists who create research products like articles or books or data sets or reports, and who are the primary generators of the information that feeds into the scholarly communication ecosystem. Without these scholars and scientists, there is no ecosystem because there is nothing to work with. Of course, the universities institutionally are very important elements of the ecosystem as well. They are the institutions that train scientists and scholars and that provide, as students, and then for their faculty who provide research facilities, who very often curate the data that is created at the university. They may curate it well and they may not curate it so well, but a lot of the research data that is created ends up being held by the institution that employs the researchers. So universities are a very important element of scholarly communication. And then, of course, there are publishers. Publishers are the ones who are charged with vetting and evaluating the research outputs that are reported on, and then edit them and publish them in journals or as books, and then market those publications, make sure that they're distributed, and increasingly, publishers themselves are now the archives of the things that they publish. This is a relatively recent development. Up until the late 90s, the early 2000s, publishers themselves didn't really have an archiving function. They would create research products in the form of articles and books, send them out to the world. Libraries and to some degree individuals would collect them, but the libraries really acted as the archives of these articles and books. Now that the publication of these things is mostly happening online, we now expect the publishers to serve as the archives of their content. And that's been a real shift for publishers over about the last 20 years. And of course, this brings us to libraries. Libraries serve the very important function of brokering access to licensed content, most of which is available online. Of course, libraries also collect printed materials and hold those materials and organize them in their buildings. But increasingly, the majority of the use that of the content that libraries provide to their patrons is provided online and is licensed rather than purchased in physical documents and housed. And that varies somewhat from region to region and country to country, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But libraries also importantly supply research support both to students and also often to faculty researchers. And then, of course, the library continues to serve as an archive. Readers themselves, the people who consume the products of scholarship and science are also a very important part of the ecosystem. They are often not the ones who are purchasing the content, but their needs and their desires are what influence the libraries and other institutions that do purchase the content. So they play a very important role in the ecosystem. And then, of course, funders. Research funders are a hugely important element of the ecosystem because they provide so much of the money that underwrites both the research and increasingly the publication costs of research. And again, we'll talk about that more in just a minute. Um, Governments also play a very important role, in part because governments are often major funders of research, but also because governments create policy requirements and regulations that govern the things that authors and publishers can do with the products that are created using their funding, or with the products that are created within the countries where the government that the governments are in charge of. Governments also provide a lot of infrastructure, especially for the hard sciences. Um, and then, of course, learned societies, scholarly societies, professional societies, they also play a very important role by providing networking opportunities for scholars and scientists in particular disciplines, organizing conferences that they can attend, and in many cases, acting as publishers themselves. Learned societies are often journal publishers, even though increasingly we're seeing learned societies making deals with big commercial publishers to manage and distribute their journals for them. There are still a lot of independent societies that function as nonprofit publishers themselves. The reason that I'm going through all of this with you is to try to convey the complexity of the scholarly communication ecosystem and also the interdependence of all of these various members. Um, every one of them relies on others, and some of them compete with each other, and often they're in conflict, but they also depend on each other very much. Let's look at the next slide. In fact, it is that complexity itself that leads to conflict because the different members of this ecosystem all have different goals as well as shared ones. Everybody on this list that you're looking at wants good research to be done and to be shared with the world, but they have different priorities because they have different institutional needs. So, for example, libraries receive the money they need in order to stay in business directly from their host institutions. They don't rely on external revenue streams. Libraries are not usually selling anything. Their focus is mainly on providing access and helping their patrons use information effectively and responsibly. Publishers, on the other hand, are interested both in sharing information and in making money. Now, some publishers need to make money just so they can keep doing their work, and others are trying to make money so that they can realize profits and reward their shareholders. Readers mostly just want to be able to read the content and to some degree reuse it. Sometimes they want to read it simply because they're interested, and sometimes because they need to be able to read the content in order to do their work, and so forth. Because of these different goals and priorities, there can be a lot of conflict between the various members of this system, and that conflict has increased with the increasing complexity of the information environment. The shift from print to online that took place primarily in the late 90s and is still going on has resulted in a huge increase in both the amount of information being created and in the ways in which it can be disseminated and stored. And 30 years after that shift began, we're still wrestling with its implications. And frankly, as you look at all the members of this ecosystem, we're kind of fighting a lot as we all try to pursue our different goals and priorities. All right, next slide. So let's talk for just a minute about why scholars communicate with each other. And here there's a spectrum of reasons, right? And at one end of the spectrum are the more selfish reasons, and at the other end of the spectrum are the less selfish reasons. On the less selfish end of the spectrum, scholars communicate with each other because they want to contribute new knowledge to their disciplines. If a biologist becomes a biologist, because she loves biology and she wants the discipline of biology to keep growing and expanding and deepening, and she wants to contribute to that. That's a very real motivation for scholars. Another similar motivation is simply to share ideas. Scholars want to be able to engage in a back and forth of ideas with their peers, and one of the ways that they do that is by communicating in formal and informal ways, writing articles, meeting each other at conferences, writing white papers, collaborating on projects. These are things that are relatively unselfish motivators for scholars to communicate. And of course, it's not just a matter of contributing to their disciplines. Most scholars genuinely want to make the world a better place. If you're a medical researcher, you're probably not doing it just because medicine is personally interesting to you. But, if you're a cancer researcher, you also are trying to find a cure for cancer. You want to improve the world. And that genuinely does drive and motivate scholars to communicate with each other. Now, those are all on the less selfish end of the spectrum. At the more selfish end of the spectrum are things like publishing in order to publicly establish the fact that you came up with this idea, or you created this product, or you discovered this process on a certain date. And you are the first one to publish about it, and anybody else who finds the same thing after you did it after you. And in some disciplines, for example, in math, if you come up with a new proof or a new theorem, you really want to be the first one to publish it, because an awful lot of prestige comes to you if you are the first one to have done it. So not only is that good for the author, but it's also an important part of the scholarly record to establish when an idea was first published or when a finding was first announced. Scholarly communication is the mechanism, in the form of publishing, is the mechanism by which we establish those things. And of course, also, if you are an academic, you have to publish in order to secure your career. The phrase publish or perish comes from this idea that if you're a scholar and you want to keep your job at a university, you've got to demonstrate that you're contributing new knowledge to your discipline, and the way you demonstrate it is by publishing it. So one of the things that drives scholars to communicate with each other is, frankly, just the demand that is placed on them to publish if they want to keep their jobs. And then, this is kind of a selfish motivation, but for a lot of us who write in a scholarly or academic way, it's genuinely enjoyable. I realize that some of you are going to say, "Are you crazy? You like writing?" But the fact is, personally, I do. One of the main reasons that I write is that I can't seem to stop myself from writing. Now, I know that there are a lot of people for whom writing is a real chore and they hate it. But a lot of people in the scholarly world write because it's fun, it feels good, and they enjoy doing it. So sometimes you will hear people say, scholarly authors write in order to, fill in the blank. Usually they are partly right. But the reality is that authors write for a variety of reasons, and often for more than one. Nobody writes for only one reason. All of us write to contribute to our disciplines and to share ideas and to achieve career success and to establish priority. These are all contributing factors that lead scholars to communicate with each other. So, for example, I might write an article so that it can be published in a journal that will advance my career, and also so that I can contribute to my discipline, and also so that I can establish that I had an idea first. So again, a cancer researcher probably really wants to cure cancer and also really wants to get tenure. So doing research and publishing it can serve both of those purposes. All right, let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about some of the ways that scholars communicate with each other. And again, we're looking at a spectrum, in this case, from more formal methods of communication on one end to less formal methods of communication on the other. On the more formal end of the spectrum is, of course, the peer-reviewed journal article, which is sort of for many disciplines, it is the gold standard of publishing. In order to get tenure, you have to be regularly publishing articles in peer-reviewed journals. And often you're required to publish in peer-reviewed journals that have a certain impact factor. And we'll talk about impact factor in just a minute. But in other disciplines, journal articles are less important and books are more important, especially disciplines in the humanities. In the humanities and to some degree in the social sciences, it's very common that you cannot get tenure unless you have published at least one original monograph, usually with a university press. But another more formal method of scholarly communication is the thesis or dissertation that you write as a graduate student. I don't know how different this might be in India. In the US, the master's degree is designed to demonstrate that you have mastered a discipline. And when you write your thesis for your master's degree, your thesis is supposed to take existing scholarship from your discipline and synthesize it and demonstrate that you really understand the literature of your discipline. Whereas a doctoral dissertation is designed to create a new and original contribution to your discipline. And your dissertation is meant to demonstrate the new and original idea that you have created on your own and are now contributing to the discipline. For many scholars, the dissertation that they write during their doctoral program may turn into the first book that they publish with a university press. Of course, the book will be substantially revised, but it will often be based on their dissertation. Another more formal example of a scholarly communication mechanism is the white paper or the position paper. These are papers that are often generated by research institutes or by think tanks or by government agencies. They may represent, when they're position papers, they may represent the organization's position on an issue. And white papers are very often the result of internal research that was done that is now being published and made available to the world. Often white papers and position papers are made available to the public for free, but not always. Sometimes they're sold. But they are almost always institutional expressions of scholarship rather than one individual author's or one team of authors' research findings. And then, of course, there are conference presentations. I mean, you guys are all familiar with these things. Conference presentations are another more formal method of communication where you prepare a paper and you stand up in front of a group and sometimes you read the paper and then you answer questions. We've all been to these conferences. You know what they're like. So those are all things on the more formal end of the spectrum. On the less formal end of the spectrum are publications like blogs, like academic or professional blogs. When Kashema was introducing me, she mentioned that I write for a blog called The Scholarly Kitchen. It's the official blog of the Society for Scholarly Publishing. And in that blog, I and about 15 or 20 other writers, every day there is a post from one of us or from a guest that addresses an issue in scholarly communication that we think is worth discussing. That kind of publication doesn't help me get tenure in the same way that a peer-reviewed journal article does, but it does count as part of my contribution to my profession. Of course, societies often have newsletters, disciplines have newsletters where they that act as a forum for less formal discussion of disciplinary issues. And then there's the discussion that happens on social media, on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on threads, where scholars just sort of converse with each other online. Preprints, usually as a precursor to publishing a journal in an article, the preprint distribution is a way that scholars can circulate preliminary versions of their articles and often get feedback on them before they do a final revision and submit them for publication. And then, of course, posters are a less formal way of presenting ideas at a conference. And another thing that happens at a conference is simply in-person networking. That is a form of scholarly communication. When I run into one of my colleagues at a conference whom I haven't seen in a year, and we sit down and chat about the things that are going on in our institutions and the programs that we're undertaking, that is a form of scholarly communication, and it can be a very important one. All right, let's go to the next slide. This is where I think I'm going to spend the bulk of my time with you today, is addressing some of the issues and challenges that we face in scholarly communication today. And the first one, believe it or not, is the ongoing migration of scholarly communication out of the print realm and into the online realm. Now, this migration has happened almost completely in most disciplines in Europe and the UK and North America, and to a very real degree in South and Central America as well. But there are regions of the world in which scholars don't necessarily have consistent, reliable access to the internet. In fact, some of them don't have consistent, reliable access to electricity. And for them, of course, online content can be very difficult to get access to. And so for them, print continues to be a very important format. By the way, this creates a real problem for publishers. Publishers would love nothing more than to stop printing journal issues and stop printing and shipping books and just do everything online. But they can't do that because so many of the people who need access to their content can only use print. And as long as that's the case, publishers have to continue publishing in this dual track. I know that it drives them crazy, but that's not going to change in the foreseeable future. One of the other issues that has become a very interesting one is what's called the big deal. Many of you may be familiar with this term. Some of you probably aren't. What the big deal means is back in the early 2000s, publishers started offering libraries, as publishers started moving their journals online, they started offering libraries a deal where they would say, so suppose that a publisher publishes 500 journals and they've got a library that subscribes to 200 of their journals, but now all of those journals are available online. The publisher would go to that library and say, look, when you renew your subscriptions for these 200 journals, if you pay an additional, relatively small amount of money, we will give you, in addition to those 200 journals that you subscribe to, we'll give you online access to all the rest of our journals too. But you can't cancel those 200 subscriptions that you had, and then get online access to all of our journals for that small amount of money. You have to continue subscribing to those journals, and as long as you do that and pay this additional fee that is not very much, we'll give you online access to all of our journals. Well, libraries loved that deal because now instead of just having 200 of that publisher's journals, they have all of the journals, and it doesn't cost that much more. The problem is that as time goes on and libraries can't cancel any of those journals, and as prices continue to rise, libraries become less and less able to subscribe to anything else. And so because the big deal has matured over the past 20 years, that problem has become more and more acute for libraries. And we could do a whole webinar on things that libraries are trying to do to deal with this big deal problem. But for now, you just need to know that this is a problem and it's a challenge that we're dealing with. The impact factor itself is an issue and a challenge. Very briefly, the impact factor is a rating that a journal gets that is based on the number of citations to articles published in that journal. The more articles in a given journal get cited by other journals, the higher the impact factor of the journal. And in many disciplines at many universities, faculty members are judged by how many peer-reviewed articles they publish in journals with an impact factor of X or higher. Now, there are a lot of things wrong with the impact factor. Frankly, everybody hates the impact factor because it's not really a quality measure. And it was never intended to be used as a quality measure, but it is being used as a quality measure, and that drives people crazy. And yet, despite other metrics that have been invented to try to displace the impact factor continues to be the single most important metric for most authors in most disciplines. That is a real challenge. The open access movement itself has been a very fascinating mix of benefits, has brought a really fascinating mix of benefits and challenges. One of the challenges is that the most pervasive model for funding open access, and for those of you who don't know, open access, when an article is published on an open access basis, that means that it is available to everybody in the world online to read and usually to reuse freely. Rather than you having to pay for access to the article, it's just made freely available to everyone. So then with that model, you've got to ask yourself, well, who is covering the costs of publishing in that case? The most pervasive model for covering those costs is what's called the article processing charge, or the APC. There are a lot of journals that don't charge APCs, that make their content open access with an institutional subsidy. But the great majority of articles that are published on an open access basis are funded by APCs. Now, what you are immediately realizing, I'm sure, is that when you take the toll gate from where it used to be between the reader and the content and move it to between the author and the publishing service, you haven't moved away from a toll access system. You've just changed the position of the toll gate. So APC funded open access is creating a lot of problems, even as it's making a lot of content freely available to the world, which is a good thing. With the emergence of APCs, and as libraries have gotten more and more frustrated with the APC model, that has led us to start entering into what we call transformative agreements. And very briefly, the way a transformative agreement works is that the library and the publisher of the journals enter into an agreement whereby the publisher says, okay, you pay the subscription fee and maybe a little more, and in return, the authors at your institution will be allowed to publish on an open access basis in our journals at no charge. Or alternatively, the model can be the other way around. The library will commit a certain amount of money to the publisher to cover article processing charges for their institutional authors, and then the publisher gives the institution free access to the content. Transformative agreements are very interesting and pose a lot of challenges and complexities and problems. There is a fair amount of momentum behind transformative agreements, but they are not yet a pervasive model, at least in the US. They're growing a bit faster in Europe, where governments can actually enter into agreements with publishers, because in European countries, the government typically controls all of higher education. But because that's not the case in the US, it's harder for models like this to get a foothold, because there isn't one single authority saying, you're going to do it this way. And of course, the emergence of open data and open science, which is a part of the sort of general movement towards openness, also creates both benefits and issues and challenges. Open data require, so when we make data open, when we make data freely available to everybody in the world, that means we have to not just store the data, but we also have to store the data in a way and on a platform that can be accessed by other people. And we have to serve the data out in comprehensible ways. This is not a cheap or easy thing to do. And it's giving a lot of institutions a lot of heartburn as we try to figure out how not only to make data open, but how to provide open data effectively. And then the broader issue of open science, which includes things like open peer review and other kinds of transparent science practices, also create challenges. Not all science can or should be made transparently visible to the public. And often the science research that is being done is proprietary. And for example, with drug companies, there are a lot of issues around how and whether to make different kinds of science open and how open to make it. And again, this could be a topic for a whole other webinar. Peer review itself is a very interesting challenge in the world of scholarly communication for a couple of reasons. One of them is that every decade for the past 100 years, the amount of research being done has just continued to grow exponentially. And that means that journals are proliferating as more and more papers are being submitted and more scientific and scholarly specialties emerge. And it also means that publishers are being bombarded with more and more submissions. And it is getting harder and harder to find peers of the authors submitting papers who are willing on a volunteer basis to review those papers and prepare them for publication. One of the things that militates against effective peer review is the fact that you don't really get any credit for being a peer reviewer. When I review a paper for a journal and I take my time to read it and give responses to it and make criticisms and make suggestions and then send those back to the journal, when that paper eventually gets published, nobody knows that I was the peer reviewer. I just do that out of the goodness of my heart because I want to support my discipline. That is not a really strong motivator for everybody all the time. And editors really struggle, especially right now, to find reviewers for articles. That is a real challenge in the scholarly communication ecosystem right now. And then, of course, there's the reproducibility and replication crisis about which many of you will have heard. And we don't really have time to go into it except to say that it's becoming increasingly clear that an awful lot of research being done right now, particularly in the social sciences, but not only in the social sciences, is not replicable, meaning that when other people do the same study that was published, they tend to come up with different results, which suggests that either they didn't do the study exactly the way the authors of the original study did, or something is wrong with the data or was wrong with the research methodology. This is a growing and very concerning problem in science, because if the general public can't be confident that we are doing science right, they're going to stop trusting us, and they should. All right, let's go to the next slide. And this sort of leads us to the larger issue of academic fraud and misconduct. I don't know if some of you will be familiar with some of these, but paper mills are companies that sell pre-written papers to students and sometimes even researchers who want something to turn in but don't want to do the work or don't have the time to do the work or whatever. And these have been around for years and years. But with the advent of the internet, it has become a lot easier for paper mills to do business. And the ethical implications of that are obvious. But we've also, interestingly, in recent years, seen a growth in what we call authorship mills. These are companies that for $1,000 will add your name to the list of authors on a paper. allowing you to then put that paper on your CV and maybe help you get tenure. Even though you had nothing to do with writing the paper, you can now buy authorship of a paper. I actually wrote an article about this in the Scholarly Kitchen last year after I was solicited by one of these authorship mills. It was very interesting. I'm sure many of you have heard of predatory publishers. The predatory publishing is a phenomenon that has emerged because of the article processing charge model of open access publishing. When publishers make their money by selling research services to authors, it creates an incentive to accept papers that aren't actually good enough to publish, because if you accept the paper, then you get the revenue from the APC. Now, most open access publishers manage that conflict of interest very honestly and very well. But there are publishers, unfortunately, tens of thousands of them, who have emerged that embrace that conflict of interest instead of managing it, and they pretend to be peer-reviewed journals, but in fact they will publish any nonsense that you submit as long as you pay the APC. And then they will present it to the world as if it were in fact peer-reviewed scholarship. This is a very difficult problem that is causing major, major concern in the scholarly communication ecosystem at the moment. Some of you may also have heard of citation cartels. These are agreements that authors and editors enter into between themselves where they say, we will increase our journal's impact factor by agreeing to cite each other extensively in the articles that we publish. And then they will pressure authors to cite these members of their cartel as well. We need to talk about generative AI. I am not an expert on language learning artificial intelligence programs, but we can certainly talk about the fact that let's go to the next slide. That generative AI has the potential to save us a huge amount of labor in some ways that might be perfectly ethical and very effective. So, for example, if I'm applying for a job and I have a generative AI product at my disposal, I might say, write me a cover letter that I can use to apply for the job of X. And then starting with whatever the AI generates, I can then edit it and change it and make it a genuine expression of my own self, but I've got something to work with, and that makes it easier to do. On the other hand, of course, it can be used to defraud or to misrepresent work that you did not do as your own work. I don't think that we yet have any idea how many tasks AI is going to end up making easier for us, in particular with regard to search tools. I think our children are going to listen to us talk about doing Google searches, and they're just going to laugh at how primitive the Google search is at interrogating the huge database of content that is the internet. I think by the time our children start researching online, they're going to be using AI tools that will be much more effective and much more productive than Google is now. But we don't yet know what those are going to look like. Of course, AI brings with it a lot of concerning issues, because AI tools search massive amounts of data all at once. They are often accessing personal data that you might not even know is out there on the internet. Or depending on how sophisticated the bot is, it may be drilling down and getting into databases of content that are not openly available on the internet, but that can be accessed through internet available portals. The potential threats to personal privacy are obvious. Also, the fact that this is a language learning mechanism and that language is created by people who have biases and prejudices means that products of artificial intelligence are likely to reflect the biases and prejudices that are in the language that it is mining in order to create these products. that is a real cause for concern. Any of you who have used a tool like ChatGPT to create a paper may have noticed that ChatGPT in particular is notorious for somehow making up fake quotes and sometimes citations to articles that don't actually exist. This can be a real problem if you rely on something like ChatGPT to help you with your research. And then, of course, AI is also likely to plagiarize because it's gathering data from all over and pulling original work by people into its output. And if you then incorporate that output into your work, there might be a paragraph that was lifted entirely from somebody else. And if you don't notice that or have no way of knowing it, and then you publish your paper under your name, you are then responsible for the plagiarism, even though you didn't deliberately take something from anybody else. So these are all very important and very complex issues that we're only just beginning to grapple with when it comes to artificial intelligence. Okay, next slide, please. So this is where I start coming to the end here. As you think about your future careers, and as you think about the degree to which your career is likely to bring you into this scholarly communication ecosystem, there are some questions that I think it would be wise for you to ask yourselves, start asking yourselves now. One of them, of course, is going to be, what kind of career path am I going to follow? Do I want to go into academia? Do I want to go into professional research, maybe with a with a medical technology company or with a political science think tank? Do I want to go into a government agency or government service where I may be doing research and producing position papers or white papers? One of my sons recently graduated from college in physics, and although he is a physicist, his first job in his career is a job as a writer. He is a technical writer for a company that contracts with with the military, and so I don't think that he ever anticipated by going into physics that he would be embarking on a career as a writer, but that's what he's doing. So as you think about what track your career might take, you should be thinking about, what are the ways that I'm going to end up being involved with scholarly communication? If you decide to go into an academic track, you need to ask yourself, do I want to focus on, or do I want to work at academic institutions that focus on undergraduate education, or do I want to go into institutions where the focus is on applied research? Those are going to be two very different tracks, especially in terms of scholarly communication. You'll be much more intensely involved with the scholarly communication ecosystem in the applied research track than you will be on the undergraduate education track. Eventually, you'll probably find yourself needing to select places to submit your work. As you are getting ready to do that, you're going to need to be asking yourself questions about, what are the norms of my discipline? What do my colleagues expect to see me do? And how are they going to evaluate me when the time comes for me to go up for tenure or to go up for promotion in my company? If you're going to be doing funded research, you need to make yourself very familiar with the requirements that funders or your institutions apply to your research and to the funding. If you accept research funding and then don't do your research or don't publish your research in the way that the funder requires, you might not get funding from them again. So that's a very important thing to be aware of as you begin your career. And then, of course, you need to educate yourself about the editorial policies of the main journals in your profession. Different journals have different policies for publishing articles. And if you're in a profession where there are 3 or 4 journals that you have to publish in order to progress in your career, you need to know what the editorial policies are for those journals so that you're not taken by surprise. Detecting and avoiding predatory publishers is so important as you start your career. One of the things that makes predatory publishers predatory is that they actively go after potential authors, and they'll send you emails saying, "Oh, you are such a great researcher and such a well-respected person in your field. We would love it if you would submit an article to our journal. And our journal is internationally recognized, and it's peer-reviewed, and it has an impact factor of X." And all of those things are usually lies, but it's not usually obvious that they're lies. And so learning how to detect and avoid predatory publishers is really important. Again, we could do a whole webinar on detecting and avoiding predatory publishers, but you can find a lot of good information about them online. What are the ways in which you want to make an impact in your profession? Are you looking to mainly make the world a better place directly through your research? Or do you want to educate others to help them learn how to make a difference? What discipline do you want to go into, and how do you see yourself advancing that discipline? Right now, obviously, is the time to be thinking about that, and to be thinking about what the implications of your choices are for the ways that you're going to interact with scholarly communication. And then, of course, the question of how much of what you publish should be formal, like peer-reviewed articles or books, and how much of it should be informal. That's going to depend from discipline to discipline and from job to job. All right, next slide. So this is the end. These are the last points that I want to try to impress upon you. The first one is, don't let anybody tell you that there's only one legitimate path for you as a young scholar or scientist. You don't have to go into academia, even if you get a PhD. There are lots of wonderful career opportunities for people with deep academic training who don't necessarily want to be on a tenure track career path. You can work for industry, you can work for government, you can work independently as a consultant. Keep your mind open as you prepare to start your career, and be prepared to be surprised by things that interest you that you didn't anticipate would interest you. That has happened to me over and over in my career, and by keeping my mind open, I've ended up going down some really rewarding and exciting paths that I would not have anticipated I would want to go down. Bear in mind that every career path you follow is going to have a different set of norms and expectations when it comes to scholarly communication, but that all of them are going to expect of you a high standard of honesty and of ethics. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you that, but I feel like it's an important thing to say. As you progress in your career, you'll want to be thinking strategically about the channels of scholarly communication that you explore. I would recommend that you become comfortable in multiple kinds of scholarly communication: writing informally, writing formally, writing in long form, writing in short form, interacting with colleagues effectively and wisely on social media. The more you diversify your methods of scholarly communication, the more effective you'll be and the more of an impact you'll have. And then the last point is, don't be tricked into accepting false choices. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that people do things for a variety of reasons. Never let anybody tell you that you have to choose between, for example, publishing in an open access journal and publishing in a toll access journal. You can do both. You don't have to choose between doing funded research and doing independent research. You can do funded research one year and independent research another year. You have options, and sometimes people will try to tell you that there's only one right way to do scholarly communication, and it's just not true. There's just a whole world of opportunities available to us in this realm, and more of them are going to become available as time goes on. And that is it. If you go to the last slide, you'll see my my email address there. I'm happy to receive email from anyone, anytime. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Facebook. And with that, I'll just thank you for your time and invite any questions or comments that you might have.
Thank you, Rick. That was a wonderful introduction into the realm of scholarly communication. I would like to tell the audience, the young researchers, the students, that this is only the beginning. It's just an introduction into the vast world of scholarly communication. So the topics that Rick has mentioned inside of the slides, predatory publishing or paper mills or the impact factors, there are several aspects of these things that you guys should know while targeting publications, how to target the journals, what kind of quadrants are applied to the journals by publishing, the impact factor giving agencies or the site score giving agencies. They are huge topics in themselves. And since this is just an introduction, I assure you, you come with the topics that you want to know more about it. Please feel free to reach out to us, and we shall be only too happy to give in-depth information to you, say it by means of expert talks, or invite Rick again or someone else, or even we could also try and answer your queries. So the floor is open for any questions. If you have any questions or something you would want to know more from Rick, he's available. Please go on. Please introduce yourself and yeah, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah. Good morning, Dr. Rick. I'm Yogeshwar, and I'm pursuing a PhD in philosophy from School of Liberal Arts, IIT Jodhpur. So my question to you is, can you speak more about the advantages of using generative AI? Because from where I come from, I feel that it's more about outsourcing your work to a system rather than thinking and developing something out of your own conviction. Also, I didn't understand this point that it's a labor saving thing, because we live in a world, whether it's US or it's India, we always need more people to get job, right? And this whole thing about labor saving. So perhaps, I would like to understand the advantages of it more in a much better way. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Two great questions. First of all, the advantages of labor saving, obviously labor saving is always a two-edged sword, right? Because when you are saving labor, you are also, by definition, taking away something that could be somebody's job. And so, the degree to which AI can make the world a better place through labor saving on balance is an open question. And again, I am not an expert on artificial intelligence, but I think the challenge is going to be, can we use artificial intelligence to save the kind of labor that no one wants to do and that humans can't do very well, and free up humans to do other kinds of labor that also need to be done that we are not getting done very well now because we're having to do the other kind. Now, to what degree will we be able to achieve that, that perfect goal with AI? I have no idea. But I share your concern about the potential effects of AI to just put people out of work and not end up creating a benefit on balance. As far as using AI to sort of think for you, and I think from especially for you as a philosophy student, I think the idea of using AI to help you with your work probably is probably kind of terrifying, because if you are trying to learn how to be a philosopher, artificial intelligence is not, you can't be using artificial intelligence to do your thinking for you. But what you might be able to use artificial intelligence for example, is to gather all, like, let's say that you're doing research on Neoplatonism, right? And you need to find examples of Neoplatonic thought across a period of 200 years. It might take you a week in the library with a very limited collection to find half as many examples as an AI bot might be able to find in 30 seconds, drawing on a global library of content. You wouldn't ask the AI bot to analyze those examples for you, but you might ask it to gather those examples for you so that you can then do the thinking about them rather than spending all that time just gathering them. That's one example of how I could imagine AI being helpful to somebody in your discipline.
Thank you, Rick. Anybody else? Anyone else has any questions? If there are no more questions, then before I request Dr. Venkatesh Murthy for presenting the concluding remarks for today, I would request Dr. Shankar to share his thoughts on this webinar, on this talk, and the series that we have rolled out for students. I must tell you, Dr. Shankar Manoharan from Department of Bioscience and Bioengineering is one of our very active members of Library Committee. And we derive huge benefits from his experience, from his knowledge, and his innovative thoughts for the library. Shankar?
Hello, Rick. Thank you so much for joining today. It was a fantastic experience to learn about the different aspects of scholarly communication. I was particularly fascinated by the ecosystem that you spoke about in the beginning. Often we're restricted to our own domains. We just think about our specific areas of academic publishing. But it was insightful to learn more about the entire ecosystem and how each person plays a distinct role. I think this is a fantastic initiative that the library has taken up to invite experts like you to introduce these concepts to our students who are at very early stages in their career. I'm sure they'll benefit a lot from this. And I'd like to thank Dr. Shema and her team for taking up this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Shankar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shankar.
I now invite Dr. Venkatesh Murthy from School of Management and Entrepreneurship to kindly present the concluding remarks for today's session. And then I will hand over the baton. I'll request Murthy to hand over the baton to Chatwani ji to close the session. Dr. Murthy.
Thank you, Shema. First and foremost, I would like to thank the speaker, Dr. Anderson, for giving us with such a detailed session, which is extremely of great use for doctoral scholars and anybody who is interested in academic writing. I would like to put the talk into two different and distinct perspectives. Dr. Anderson talked about ecosystem, in other words, a stakeholder-driven system that involves many players to work together, work as one unit. That is one aspect of his talk. The other aspect is the personal choice, the individual's role and responsibility, in which Dr. Anderson talked about choice and the personal freedom one should exercise in making the right choices for oneself. going back to the ecosystem aspect of the talk, uh, to me, the key takeaways are how to really identify the right set of stakeholders for you as a scholar. Of course, you cannot leave out one stakeholder and work with another stakeholder at a given time, but at a given within a given research ecosystem that you choose, whether you would like to go with a funder or whether you would like to choose to work as an independent researcher for a given time period. At times, when you work as an independent researcher, you might end up asserting a little bit of your own freedom and then might well do the way you want to do it than getting compelled by the funders and the research funding agencies' specific regulations and norms, which is a key element. And also to choose the right kind of publisher. There are several predatory journals available, predatory sources available, and how to choose the right publisher to publish your research work, which is an important aspect of ecosystem. And moving on to his talk, took us further ahead into the aspect of what kind of choices we make as academics. Is it more of selfish reasons or is it more of altruistic reasons? So what sort of choices that we make and what gives us that kick or that energy to be in that academic space is another important aspect of his talk. And also, if in case another aspect of personal choice that he talked about was to pick and choose between the formal and informal writing. If you at times think you would like to express your academic ideas, newer point of views, you might well choose an informal source, might well write a LinkedIn blog, or might well write a post on Facebook, and still need not to be pressured by the formal set of academic writing. Can give yourself a little more space. Again, that's part of how an individual expression could be. And moving into Dr. Anderson in detail talked about several challenges that we might end up encountering on a daily basis as research scholars. How do we really overcome these challenges? At times there can be quick temptation to publish in an easygoing journal that is ready to accept your paper and make it available in public, and that might give you a sense of satisfaction, but that suddenly might well also may not give you a great satisfaction in a long run, because some of your own colleagues might well point at that you are published in a predatory journal. So that might well become a very humiliating aspect. So therefore, the choice of right journal, right space would be very, very important. And moving into, and of course, Dr. Anderson in detail talked about generative AI and its pros and cons, and we need to be very aware of those aspects. And at the end, he concluded his talk by once again reiterating on the fact that as an individual, how we should exercise our freedom, and the path that we choose can be very carefully out, instead of getting really compelled by factors other than our own choices. At times, family might compel you to go into certain fields. Your colleagues, your friends going into some field might sort of make you feel that you should choose that path, but that may not be really a right choice and right path for you. And the choice of area of research, at times some of us think somebody else is publishing so very well in one specific area of research, so I should also go into that. Probably that may not be a right choice for you. So you might have to think about your own personal interest, think about the academic knowledge that you have gathered over the years, and based on that, you need to choose the right area to do research. all in all, the academic communication is really a critical part of our journey as researchers. And Dr. Anderson really has taken us through a detailed view of academic communication. And I personally, and also on behalf of the team, I would like to thank Dr. Anderson for sharing his invaluable thoughts with us. Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your concluding remarks. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of IIT Jodhpur, I stand here to express my gratitude and extend a warm vote of thanks to the speaker, Rick Anderson, esteemed faculty members, and fellow students who have made this event a resounding success. Today, we had the privilege of delving into this fascinating realm of scholarly communication, exploring the intricacy that lie beneath the surface of academic research and publications. We were fortunate to have a distinguished expert who shared his valuable insight and knowledge, shedding the light on the nuances that students should be aware of when navigating the realm of scholarly communications. His talks was not only informative but also thought-provoking, encouraging us to think critically and inspiring us to take a more active role in the academic discourse. Last but not the least, we express our deepest gratitude to the Director IIT Jodhpur for providing us with the much needed support and a platform to host this event. His commitment to fostering academic excellence and promoting scholarly discourse is commendable. And we are privileged to be a part of such a vibrant academic community. In closing, I place my thanks on record to the Chairman, Library Committee, and the committee members of Library and my library team, Computer Center, and Logistic team for their kind support. Thank you all for your presence and active participation. You can join us for a high tea in a while. Certificates certificates of participation shall be emailed to you on your registered email ID. So we'll gather for the refreshment within 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks very much, everyone. I appreciate your attention. And I'm going to bed now.
Thank you so much, Rick, for being awake. And yeah, we troubled you because of this huge time difference, the time zone difference. Next time, I assure you, we'll find a more comfortable time.
Oh, this is totally fine. Thank you very much.
That's Rudy. I can see he's nudging you to go to sleep now,
Yeah,
Rudy.
that's Rudy. He wants me to come downstairs with him. Say hi, Rudy.
Hi, Rudy.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Right. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Dr. Shankar and Dr. Murthy. It was a pleasure having you. Students, I'll take 5 more minutes from you. My heart-to-heart interaction with our IITJ students and the Ayurveda students. I would like to know more from you. What topics do you want us to cover in these webinar series, which are going to continue at least once in a month? What we're going to do here is, What we're going to do here is, while we post your certificate of participation by email, we're going to send you out a feedback form too. We'd love to hear from you. Ayurveda, our closest neighbor, please drop down to our library. Our library is open for you as well. Try to find some resources here. If you don't get something, we are available. We'll help you out. Yeah, Yogeshwar, you go first.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's such a wonderful initiative.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to continue with my question, perhaps a session on responsibly using AI, something like that can be planned ahead, and we look forward to the sessions.
Yes, so let me give you a quick heads up. There's another webinar coming on this 20th at evening 5 o'clock, same place. That's by another librarian. He is engineering service librarian at Drexel University, Philadelphia. He will be talking about a similar topic, but then probably he will also delve a little bit deeper into the AI aspect of it. See, the chat GPT, all these AI tools are as new to you, as new to us. We are also learning, we are on the way with you, just on parallel tracks. While you are on your subject track, we are on our subject track. But we are here to support you, right? So from our perspective, we are also doing a little bit of research. We are using the tool. We are doing a little bit of research and we are trying to find out how good or bad is it for you and how to help you refrain from the perils of the AI tools. And yes, I assure you, we will do all these topics and this series is going to continue. One input from Yogeshwar. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Ayurveda students, please feel free. This is your institute as well. Morning.
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Deepra Sinha. I am a PhD scholar in SME department.
Great.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give an idea to regarding the seminar. Being a PhD student, we want to understand that how the technology is going to be affect in publishing the papers, writing the journals, and what are the way ahead, because the AI, everyone is talking about AI is playing a very big role.
Right.
How the things and how the data that we can collect, because that will be very authentic, that should be very authentic, so that we can understand that, because how to cope up with this technology factors, right? So these are the things that we want to understand, that so that we whatever things, because we need to publish the paper in top class journals,
right?
So that's why these are the things that if we got to know about that, it will be great for all of us.
Certainly, not just one-to-many communication mode. I would also want to let you know, guys, that you can always drop into library, connect with us. We can also do one-on-one sessions, right? One-on-one or focus group sessions. If the like-minded PhD students or PG students, a group, small group, 4-5 students, want to sit with us, chat up, exchange ideas. We may not be experts in your area, but we are able to help from our area. We'll be able to support you. Please feel free, drop in a line or two by email, by phone, or just drop in personally. We are here. I assure you, we are very much here. We can certainly take out time, maybe even in the evening times. Post dinner, we can come down to library, have a focus group discussion. We can always do this. We are here to help you. Please be assured. Something I would like to hear from Ayurveda. Yes.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Dr. Swapnil.
Great. Dr. Swapnil. Yes.
I would like to ask if you can arrange a session on data mining and statistical analysis.
Yes, sure. So, yes, somebody is recording. Please note down. Data mining and statistical analysis from the medical point of view. Medical data mining, right? All right. So I also have an expert in medical technologies area. She comes from Mumbai and she usually visits AIIMS Jodhpur. She is a library literature expert. She runs a company called QMed Foundation, Dr. Vasumati Sri Ganesh. Shortly, I'm going to invite her here. And please make sure that Ayurveda guys, you join, and the medical technology students at IIT Jodhpur, and everybody, in fact, everybody is, it's open for all, but specifically for the medical students. I'm going to invite her and stay tuned. And while I note down this request, I'm also telling that I'm going to invite her to for a talk. And if you require any contacts, networks, please approach us. Whatever we have, we will be happy to share with you. Anything else? Yes, please.
Hello, ma'am. I'm
Hi.
Ardhendu from Department of Bioscience and Bioengineering.
Right.
Ma'am, it's a very nice introduction to the webinar session series you mentioned. So I'm doing a PhD for a long time here. So there are several times we got comments from the reviewers while trying to publish our articles that the statement what you are saying, it is hyperbole. They also sometimes say do proofreading of what you are writing. So I expect, can we have some more detailed session on the writing skills specifically? Like there are several times I also experienced that we also get feedback from our PIs as well. I hope a lot of my PhD colleagues are sitting here, they will agree with me that what we are trying to express and send it to the journal, that is not properly get communicated. So those issues also sometime.
Lovely. I have connects for author sessions, the writing skills, communication skills. Yes, I have very good colleagues who can help you with that, and I can also be a part of it. Like I said, drop down to my office. Let's discuss what exactly we can do for you. I mean, webinars are always there, but if you want one-on-one session, to pick up more skills, to pick up more deeper details, we can always invite the expert over in personal mode. You can have a session with him. We can invite him. And personally, I'm also available. Whatever comments you get, I understand the faculty members have less time and you are time starved, they are time starved, but we are here. We'll help you out. Please drop in and please note down this topic as well. Writing, academic writing, scholarly writing. Yeah, there are a set of tools that we subscribe to from the library. You already must be knowing about Grammarly and the plagiarism tools. So Quillbot, any other open source tools are also available. So we'll do this. Anything else? Any feedback from Ayurved? There's a good lot from Ayurved. I would like to know more about your feeling about today's webinar. It's just an introduction, but then I just wanted to give a feeler also to you. IITJ, anything else? Show of hands, how much should we continue? What should be the frequency of these series? Monthly? Monthly one? Majority? Great. Great, great, great. Thank you so much. Any more questions? I am here to answer. All right, then we close the session. Yeah, there's a question coming up. Yes. Ji.
Hello.
Ji.
Myself, Dr. Rahul Pandey from Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan Rajasthan Ayurveda University.
Ji.
I want to know some of the spiritual aspects and its effects on the brains and the EEG. Some of the aspects that we know can from technological perspectives from yoga, Kriya Yoga, some of the aspects like this.
You would want to delve into literature on this?
I want to know from the technical aspects, what are the effects of yoga on the brain and the mechanisms and wave frequencies and vibrations on the brains.
Right. So let me tell you, this is an area which is pertaining to more of your academic and technical, I am not an expert, or library is not an expert on this. What I can do here is, when I conduct a webinar on the medical side of the medical literature, medical information, I can request the experts to delve deeper into the areas which give you more exposure to the literature in these areas, right? And parallelly, I can maybe talk to the Department of BSB, Bioscience and Bioengineering, and pass on this topic of yours to them and try to figure out if you can get technical help from that side. Will that work? Right. Thank you. All right. It was heartening to have you here. Thank you very much and appreciate your joining.